the movement, I don't really know where it's going. That's something that I'm quite confused about.
You're supposed to be confused.
I'm confused.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Like,
If you're not confused, you're not paying attention. We have already a huge wave of ill health, so many problems from our diet. At some point, all the moms and the dads are going to go, what are we doing? I won't tolerate it anymore. Yeah. I don't think normally we win when we try to make a deal with the devil. We're just not powerful enough, smart enough, whatever enough in order to do that. I think we're getting to see, well, okay, let's destroy the system and see what happens.
But was it different in the 70s? Let's destroy it. That's a pretty strong word.
I think it was different in the 70s because the people who wanted to start over didn't have any power. Mm-hmm. They didn't run the government. Mm-hmm. They weren't being supported by the richest man in the world, right? So it was truly a grassroots movement, and it was saying, you know what, we're just going to do it differently anyway.
Welcome to the Market Gardener podcast, where we believe that small-scale farming is changing the world. Join us for insightful conversations with people who are working to build a better future. A future with less mass production and more production by the masses. The revolution is in the field. Let's get digging. This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. Okay, folks, this is going to be a good one. We have one of our favorite guests, Dave Chapman, organic pioneer. Yeah, we can bring that in. And is it okay if I say father figure of our movement now? Am I allowed to say that?
I always feel like I'm too young to be a father figure, but yeah. Elliot, he's a father figure.
No, I think you're like Elliot.
Yeah,
I think you're just the same in terms of legends and in terms of passing down wisdom. And last time you were here, we talked about the real organic movement. We talked about regenerative and all of these things. And I don't know what we're going to be talking about today, but I'm really happy to see you again, Dave. Thank you for being here.
I'm great. This is great to be here, Jay. Yeah. Such a nice drive to come up from Vermont.
Oh,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, we're neighbors.
We're neighbors. It's very close.
How far is the drive exactly?
2.5 hours. All easy.
It's not bad at all. And that is a nice drive. I suggest for anyone to listen to the past episode because, of course, we're not going to just repeat everything. But could you give us the quick setting of the table on the Real Organic Project just so people understand what it is and what the movement is?
Sure. So Real Organic Project was born out of defeat. I was involved in a movement that we called Keep the Soil in Organic, and it was an attempt to reform the National Organic Program, where there's a good law. National, Organic Food Production Act was an excellent law. You can't imagine having such a good law passed in Congress. Mm-hmm. But it was passed before there was any money in organic, so nobody cared. And then as money came in, a lot of challenges came in, as is always the case, right? Money always brings corruption. And although we can't be sorry that money came in, that money came in because people wanted to buy organic, and that was a good thing. But the corruption was not good, and we really tried to reform the NOP, the National Organic Program, and we failed. And so after a big meeting down in Jacksonville, Florida, it became clear to me and a number of people that we were not going to win this. It almost didn't matter. It didn't matter who was the head of the USDA or president. Maybe if Bernie had been elected, truly it might have been different, but otherwise it didn't matter.
Democrat, when was that Republican. In terms of dates?
Bernie? Oh, no, the date? Yeah, that was in 2017.
2017.
Yeah, in November of 2017. It was a big showdown. And we lost, and people were crying, and people were calling me, crying from across the country.
Because there was a vote? Was there a vote?
There was a vote.
It got turned down.
It got turned down.
The reform got turned down.
Yeah, it was an attempt to basically reaffirm the 2010 recommendation to prohibit hydroponics in organic.
Basically, that was it.
That was it. And that was one of three big issues with the National Organic Program. One was hydroponic production was being certified. 2 was confinement livestock was being certified, and 3 was there was tremendous fraud in organic grain imports that was getting through, and that was just blatant fraud, breaking the law. The other two were more complicated. It was the lack of enforcement on the USDA. So the law said, no, you can't do that. But they said, well, our rules that we've decided you can. So we lost on those three things. And after that meeting, I and a group of farmers got together in Vermont, just down the road from here, probably an hour and a half away. And just impromptu meeting, 30 farmers came to the NOFA headquarters and said, what are we going to do? Are we going to shrug and say, well, this is still something we need to make a living, but we know it's not what we mean anymore? Or are we going to create something new? And the consensus, 100% consensus, we needed to create something new. We didn't want to give up organic as a meaningful movement. And there was not consensus about whether it should be a standalone, let's start all over again, not be connected to the USDA, or make it an add-on in the way that so many have done in the EU, where they create, like Nonchalant as an add-on to the EU certification. And we ended up going with the add-on because we didn't have $10 million a year to create a standalone that it really would have taken. And at that point, it wasn't clear it would be national. It might just be Vermont or the Northeast was very likely, because organic is protected in the Northeast because there's no big organic there.
Yeah, there's no big ag.
There's no big ag, so there's no big organic. In California, it's a very complicated discussion. So that was it. We started the Real Organic Project, and officially in February, I think, of 2018. And we have been working ever since.
Yeah, and working hard, and you have a podcast as well for anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's one of the best out there if you want to get into the minds of so many fascinating people. I mean, the level of educational, height that you reach in that podcast is awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been in the organic movement?
I think I probably started in about 1980.
80, okay.
I'm guessing.
So and did you already feel like you were coming in late, or do you feel like you came, like, where do you feel like you stand in sort of the
so it was interesting, Chris, at that point. Everything was kind of busting loose. It was the aftermath of the Vietnam War, which was hugely significant in terms of the changes it created in American culture. And whether somebody, there are a lot of people in the organic movement who go, well, I had nothing to do with that, and I was not any kind of hippie, and I'm a fundamentalist Christian, whatever. Nonetheless, we were all impacted by that cultural wave.
Like being part of the counterculture.
The counterculture is a huge thing. There's a wonderful new book coming out this week. I highly recommend it. Ooh. Yes. It's by Matthew Ingram, and it's called The Garden. And the title refers to Joni Mitchell's song Woodstock, Got to Get Back to the Garden.
Oh, wow.
And I will, as a confession, I'm in it, but it's a great book, and it's just got so many threads that it pulls together, and so many people. It's 500 pages long, and I'm still reading it. I'm on about 380, and I never thought I'd read. I thought I'll read a few pages, but it just keeps. I keep going.
Turner.
Yeah, and the things I wasn't interested in New Alchemy Institute. I knew about it. You guys probably never heard of it.
I've heard of it.
I've heard that name.
Okay.
But I don't know anything about it. I just heard it.
Yeah. If you were 5 years younger, you wouldn't have heard of it. That's the way things are. Our history gets forgotten, of course, because we're busy living our present. But I didn't think I would be interested in it. I knew a bit about it. But he makes everything interesting, and you see the impact in the connections of this and that. And
was he part of that?
No.
He just tells.
He's a British guy.
He's a British guy.
Yeah, he talks about things in Great Britain I had never heard of, people I didn't know, and some I do.
Does he mention Adrian Bell at all?
No.
Oh, okay. British writer I love.
Yeah, no. He mentions a lot of music. He likes music.
Okay.
But he interviewed Elliot. He writes about the Nearings. He writes about Silent Spring and Rachel Carson. He writes about Henry David Thoreau.
Wow.
Which was really interesting because you think of Thoreau, the impact of Thoreau was great, but Walden, when he spent a year living at Walden, it wasn't out in the wilderness. It was in the suburbs, essentially.
Yeah, right, in like a little woodlot next to the town.
Yeah, he walked into town twice a week for dinner with his family.
I've always thought that was fascinating about that. It's talking about a guy going to the woods and living, and he's in a little woods next to it. It doesn't sound as romantic as you might imagine it once you understand the.
Well, and I think Thoreau wasn't pretending otherwise, but it's become significant in representing to a lot of people in my generation who were going back to the country from the city.
Exactly.
Not me, I started in the country, but a lot of people were. And it was one of those books that inspired people, just as he wrote a book called On Civil Disobedience, which inspired Gandhi and Martin Luther King.
Okay.
All right? And he spent one night in jail for not paying his poll tax in protest of the Mexican War, and his aunt bailed him out. He didn't want her to, but she didn't ask his permission. So this guy who spent one night in jail in civil disobedience wrote a book that inspired people who changed world history. That's interesting.
No, it's the butterfly effect.
The butterfly effect.
And the web. It's a big web of interconnected
things. That's right.
And Dave, but I want to know, because, a book about the counterculture of the 70s is bringing your attention to this right now. You're reading that. Why? Because with everything that's going on right now, why would anyone want to read a book about what went down in the 70s? What's the connection
or in
there?
1968?
Because it isn't over, and it's a big part of how we got here. And it's not that we have to be historians, but it is helpful to understand that things aren't just the way they are. They change to become that, and they will continue to change. So yes, we're in a dark moment right now in world history, and I think it's going to get darker, but it will change, and things will get better and they will get worse. And I think we have a responsibility to carry on regardless. I mean, I think sometimes you carry the torch and it's very dark outside, and you're handing the torch on to some other poor bastard and say, I did my best, you carry on. But it's been we have a long history as humans.
So you're somehow saying that it would be good for us to kind of revisit what happened and how our movement, or if we can frame it that way, our movement began and how it was led to be what it is.
Yes.
And that could be helpful to understand where it's going.
Yes.
It's pretty bizarre for me as someone that's in it right now. The movement, I don't really know where it's going. That's something that I'm quite confused about.
Yeah.
It could be one way, it could be another. I'm seeing interests. I'm confused about words like when you were here last time, regenerative, all of that. I see so much energy going there. So many summits. And I'm like, what are they talking about? I don't get it. And I'm confused.
You're supposed to be confused.
I'm confused.
Yeah, that's the goal.
I know that getting young people into farming is something that's very necessary.
Yes.
And I'm dedicated to that. But for the rest, I don't really know where this is going.
We will always be, as people, we will always be involved in politics, and I don't mean Democrat and Republican politics or whatever the Canadian version of that is. I mean, we'll always be involved in a struggle over values about how we should live together, not just on a mountain alone, but how we live together, how we build an economy together. I think the reason to study where we came from is to realize that everything is fragile, right? Everything that we do and that we, things seem so solid, but they aren't. They're basically, what was it Lily Tomlin said, what's reality but a collective hunch? And
It can change fast.
It can change fast. There's somebody I listen to, Heather Cox Richardson. She's an American historian, and she's great. And she puts a daily blog out, and she also records it, so you can listen if you want. It's basically in response to Trump that she has not been a big fan, and she reminds us that in 1850, the slaveholders of the South controlled the presidency, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. And they were strong in Congress, but they didn't control Congress. And she said it appeared at that point that the entire country of the United States was going to go and completely embrace slavery. And all the Western states were going to be slave states. And it was like we had lost. And she said, within 10 years, the Republican Party had been born. It didn't exist in 1850. It was an anti-slavery coalition of many different points of view, but they all agreed on that. They had Abraham Lincoln as a president, and the Civil War had begun to end slavery. And 2 years later, whatever, the Emancipation Proclamation came out. It was an almost unthinkable progression in 10 years. So she says, we know what has happened. We don't know what will happen. And we should remember that. Yeah.
And there's a lot of forgetting, isn't there, in history, it seems? Because I also just listened to a series about 1968. And the amount of things that happened in that 1 year, mass in the United States, was, I don't want to say it was shocking or anything, but a little bit. Because of someone of my age, I know about the assassinations that took place, but to dive into the details as much and understand more, the details, I thought, oh my God, I think people at that moment felt like we do right now. A lot of them thought this is like the U.S. is imploding, things are falling apart, there's going to be violence, are we on the brink of a civil war? No, go. I wanted to say all this about forgetting because I wanted to ask the question, what are people forgetting right now in the world of organic? What is being forgotten that we risk losing if we don't try to bring it back to remembrance?
You know, at this point, the world of organic is a very busy place. It's like Grand Central Station, and it's under assault, of course, from the chemical companies, as always. And the chemical companies are the most powerful companies in the world, so it's not a minor thing. But there is a very mixed up bag, a very confused community of people, and not even necessarily a community. But I think that for me, the core foundational beliefs of organic are very important and are easily forgotten. And one of the things that's happened is that organic, as defined by the National Organic Program and as embraced by big agriculture, has come to mean replacing chemical inputs with organically approved inputs. And that is not what organic meant. And it's not what it means to me. I don't think it's what it means to you. And you know, the organic sales continue to increase, as they should. And we must celebrate that people are seeking an alternative to chemical agriculture, what they want to put in their body. That's really good. What's unfortunate is that there's a basic amnesia, or not amnesia, ignorance amongst a lot of the organic industry, as opposed to the organic movement, that organic is anything more than the cessation of using toxic chemicals to grow food. And it certainly is that.
Yeah.
That is essential part of it. But there's this whole other part, which is the real part, which is the reason you don't need to use the toxic chemicals is because you're growing in this, now I sound about to sound like a poster, but that microbially diverse soil, living soil with so much happening in there, and that creates real health. And the same is true, the soil microbiome is the same as our body's microbiome, the same as the plant's microbiome. We all have this kind of microbial diversity when we're in a state of health. And when we abandon that by eating a bunch of Doritos and Pepsi and crap, which does not favor our personal microbiome, and it not only is destructive to it, but we're not feeding it with the good things that it needs in order to flourish. That is a huge answer, but
can we pause there?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I didn't realize I go trotting off. Yeah,
no, I think that a lot of young people are on board with the story that you just said, living soils, and the mystic of soil. I think that's a popular thing, and you see in the movement right now, there's a lot of interest with looking at soils through microscopes and understanding soil ecology. It's even kind of a bit far-fetched in my opinion, but there's interest in that. And I think that's a nice story. The story that you just said, I think is a nice story, and it's a real one.
Yes.
And I don't think that story is out of style. I think there's going to be something about that. I do feel that we have a point there.
We have a great point, and science, real science, not corporate science,
is leading to that.
Is completely embracing and explaining the point.
Yeah.
Will Brinton once said to me, the amazing thing, David, is that in the 80 years since Albert Howard and his two wives were writing and explaining their observations of health, human health, plant health, soil health, science has basically supported all of it, right? Science is a big word, but let's say the science of biology and ecology has completely supported it. So we're in a thing and that's happening even faster. On the way here, I was listening to William Lee, who's a great doctor, and he's studying human health and
gut biome.
Yeah. What does it mean? And he's pretty clear that you need to eat organic food. You need to eat whole food, but it needs to be organic.
Yeah.
And he has very eloquent explanations about why. So this is back to that thing, and I quote Michael often on this, that Michael Pollan said when I said, Michael, this was 5 years ago or something, I said, Michael, in the 15 years since Omnivore's Dilemma, is the food system getting better or worse? Because I'm confused. I can't tell. Mm-hmm. And he said the public conversation and awareness is getting much better, but the food system is getting worse.
Okay, I want to pause there too.
Yeah.
Because on this podcast, we never talk about politics. It just hasn't been a subject of ours. But I can't help myself.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone can right now.
Because there's RFK now that's there, and whenever I listen to him, I'm like, wow, this is incredible stuff. Like linking health to the food system and making that connection just in itself, saying, we need better food if you want to be healthier, which is probably something that is new to Congress and to politics. What are your thoughts about that? Can I ask
about that? RFK or about what he's saying?
Both.
Okay.
I could rephrase that. Like we're in a coffee, you and me, Dave, and I don't follow that much. I follow from a distance. What do you think about this? Is it positive? Is it not so positive? Your opinions?
So when RFK talks about food and agriculture, I completely agree with him. And he completely agrees with me. There is no distance between our perspectives on this.
And it's novel that somebody's talking about that.
It's novel that somebody in politics is talking about that in a serious way. Mm-hmm. And, Bobby Kennedy is enormously eloquent. He's no dummy. He's a smart guy. And he's talking about things that aren't just political talking points. He's believed this for a long time. He knows a lot.
Yeah.
He's fought lawsuits against CAFOs and won some of them, right? He's fought against, pollution of our waters by agriculture. He's deeply informed. So about that and about what he says, I completely agree, and he says it very well. I don't agree with all his other perspectives. And, for me, the real question is, how do we feel about him joining Trump in order to pursue that agenda?
And that McDonald's photo just after the announcement was made, to me, was an emblem of maybe how that relationship would really be. It was just after it was announced.
Absolutely.
And then there's a photo of them on a plane all eating McDonald's. And I was like, RFK, how could you do that?
Yeah, well,
That is
he was forced to.
I know.
I'm not excusing it.
Yeah.
This was a way of Trump telling him, take the knee.
Exactly.
Kiss my ring.
100%.
I understand what you believe, but you will eat the Big Mac, right? You will do this to show that I'm the boss, right? It's just the way Elon Musk got up with his kid in the White House office and said, I'm the boss. You're sitting there, I'm standing towering over you. So these are very important, just signals. So I know lots of people who are still very excited about Kennedy. Organic farmers, and strong supporters of what we do. And I know many people who will spit at his name.
Yeah.
So let's agree that he's very divisive. I don't mean that he's trying to. I just think
his
that
means to an end is questionable.
When he embraced Trump in order to get a cabinet seat, it was okay. To me, that's a deal with the devil.
Yeah. And
we know how that works out in the stories. Faust did not do well in his deal with it, especially in the original Faust. In the nice redo, he gets saved at the end, but in the original, no, he goes down to hell, and it doesn't work out well for him. I don't think normally we win when we try to make a deal with the devil. We're just not strong enough, powerful enough, smart enough, whatever enough in order to do that. So it's fine. He's doing what he believes, and I hope he succeeds. I hope Kennedy succeeds.
Now it's like 6 months in, 4 months in?
No, not
even so.
It just seems that way.
It feels like a long time, but it's going to be interesting to evaluate what policies he's actually pushing and being able to deliver them and what grounds they're based on.
Of course, he's not the Secretary of Agriculture.
He's not.
So that's a huge thing.
And that was another thing, because I was, from a distance, not being American and not being that involved, looking, there was, Joel Salatin was pushed on a level.
And that excited a lot of people as well.
That excited a lot of people. Can you tell us what happened with that and where it's at now? And is that interesting to follow or not really?
Well, I think the thing with Joel was it's like these people are reduced to being TV stars. I mean, it's just buzz. No, I don't think anybody in the administration was seriously thinking we're going to have Joel Salatin be a major influencer in the USDA. Instead, they picked Brooke Rollins, who's a complete acolyte of Donald Trump's. And everything that she's actually said and done has been to support big ag.
Okay.
There's nothing that is friendly to small farmers. There's nothing that's friendly to organic farmers. And fine, she and Kennedy had a couple photo ops. My point is, no, she's just another Sonny Perdue, who was Trump's first Secretary of Agriculture. And I have to say, as much as I have completely challenged Tom Vilsack, deservedly so, he was still better than Brooke Rollins is going to be.
And you guys had conversations. You had a relationship. You had.
I wouldn't call it a relationship, but I met with him and we talked.
Yeah, but there was something.
There was something, but even more, it's not about me or Real Organic. I think that in the second and in Biden's term, he was genuinely trying to make everybody happy. And so he actually did give significant financial support to organic. He pledged $300 million to the Transition to Organic program, as well as billions to Climate Smart, most of which went to just evil commodity chemical farming. But a little bit of it actually went to organic too. And, you know, I do believe that it is transformative where the government puts its money. They have a lot of money. And they're huge players in agriculture. Without the USDA, chemical agriculture pretty much collapses, in my opinion. It operates at a loss. It is maintained by subsidies. And as Lindley and Scott Myers just said in the last letter, really the subsidies are subsidizing the chemical companies. That's who gets the money in the end, because that's where all the expenses are for the farms.
Before we continue, I just want to say for the record that I want to let the viewer know that it's early April when we're recording this, because by the time they hear it, they might be like, what are you talking about? That's because who knows what will happen by then.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wanted to ask you about the federal funding cuts for farmers, because maybe you have kind of you have more of a pulse on the organic movement in the U.S., and maybe you've heard of farmers. I'm just curious, are people losing funding? Is it?
Oh, yeah. Lots of people are losing funding.
Can you tell us some examples?
Like these stories? Are the NGOs, like NOFAs? And
well, NOFAs, but farmers too.
Okay.
Farmers are losing funding. Out in the Midwest, Lindley knows lots of farmers. We just interviewed Liz Grasnick, who's a great small vegetable farmer out in Missouri. And she got funding for maybe a quarter of her crop went to food shelves and schools. So they were feeding the kids good food. And they were feeding people who didn't have food good food. And it was a tremendous support for her farm. I mean, she geared up in order to supply this demand. And of course, it was pulled with a moment's notice. And, you know, she knew she'd have to lay off a quarter of her team. And she had plants she probably just throw out because she couldn't plant them because she had no market for them. So that's just one example of one program that got hit. One I know of that was kind of big. It's not directly on their farm, but I can't think of their name now. I'm sorry, but they're a New Hampshire farm, and they have a nonprofit, and they got $35 million grant to promote good biological agriculture, and they lost it. And you know, they had it. It wasn't like they were applying for it. They'd been granted it, and it was taken away. And you can imagine the amount of rebooting that's required to losing a $35 million funding source for a small operation. I'll say one thing, which is that the Real Organic Project doesn't get any of its money from the government. And I don't say that pridefully. It's never been where we went.
Yeah.
And so when it happened, there was no direct impact on us. We have lost some funding because of the debates around Kennedy. And, you know, it's very political. We certainly have strong followers and funders who believe in Kennedy, and strong followers and funders who spit at the mention of his name. So it's a complicated world out there.
Yeah, we do too. In our circle of followers, that's a lot of division as well.
A lot of division.
My lecture is that a lot of here's my lecture, and I might be wrong, but I wanna share it here. I feel that contrary to when it was the 70s, where obviously the young generation was not at all inspired by the old generation, there was a clash. And young people with new ideas were coming up with a new sense of how we should be living. I feel that there's a lot of young people, young male, that are really in Trump's bandwagon because of so many different things, but they identify with these kind of values in many ways. And so I don't feel that it's like a younger generation rebooting against an older. I think it's really mixed.
It's mixed.
And
yeah.
when I listen to Joe Rogan, he's so influential and he's so popular in that males from 16 to 45, and he's very influential, and he's, I like listening to him, but I wonder, it's not the same. I don't see that we're just gonna uplift these old white men in power. I don't think that that's the structure currently. I think so. I'm confused about where this is going.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, of course, the older people tend to have that's not always true, is it? I was going to say they tend to have more money. Certainly, the people who have money tend to be older, and so there is a power base there, and that goes both ways.
Yeah.
That goes both ways. For me, most of the younger people that I have encountered either were pretty blue or weren't going to vote at all. And that's a fascinating one to me, but that is for sure a real thing now, and it's kind of a libertarian bent, not too carefully thought out.
Yeah,
it's
but still there's an urge for something like that.
There's an urge, right, for something different.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting to see, well, okay, let's destroy the system and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's going on.
People wanted that.
Yeah. They wanted it. It's like, let's destroy it and start over. And
but was it different in the 70s? Was it
that's
that?
a great question,
No,
Jan.
but was it like, let's destroy it? Right? That's a pretty strong word.
I think it wasn't. I think it was different in the 70s because the people who wanted to start over didn't have any power. They didn't run the government. They weren't being supported by the richest man in the world, right? So it was truly a grassroots movement, and it was saying, you know what? We're just going to do it differently anyway.
Yeah.
We're going to do it our way, and we don't really care what you think. That's how I felt at the time. I remember the first time I was invited to speak to a bunch of extension agents. I was like, I don't want to speak to extension agents. They're the enemy. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah.
And, now there's wonderful extension agents, not all, but there are some wonderful. I mean, Vern Grubinger in Vermont is a huge resource to organic farmers.
He did a lot of work.
He was great, right?
I read all his books.
Yeah. It's just, and a great human being too, I would add.
Okay.
So now it's different that now it is the government destroying itself. And it is the greatest wealth in the world destroying the markets that make it wealthy. I mean, it's kind of crazy talk right now.
Yeah.
So what happens next, nobody knows. I'm sure that the people who are leading this change have no idea either. They have a plan, but they don't know what's going to happen. And I'll say one thing about revolutions is they mostly don't end very well. And, I think of the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution. And, the American Revolution was okay. It didn't end well for everybody. Slavery continued, for a long time.
A lot of blood, though.
A lot of blood. It was
between brothers and...
Yeah. It was, I don't mean that it was like a great solution. Actually, I look at Canada, I go, why don't we just do that? You guys are completely free. You have your own country, your own government. You didn't have to kill anybody. You just were a little more patient about getting there. So I understand, the Americans, but it's not like the French, the Russian, and the Chinese, where as the revolution goes along, let's kill all the leaders who started the revolution.
Yeah,
it got crazy.
Can we bounce back in time a bit on your timeline?
Yeah,
again?
of course.
Because we had started at that, you entered the organic movement in 1980. And I want to ask a few things. One, you said, and I've heard you say this before, that, Big Ag hated you. And I think people, they still feel that today to some degree, but definitely less so. It doesn't feel as adversarial, perhaps, at least as I think so. Could you just talk a bit about what that even felt like? Like, did you feel that you were really a rebel? Was there a sense of a true adversarial relationship there, and what did that feel like?
Yeah, great, Chris. First of all, I would say that some big ag has come to join organic, and some has not, but big chemical has definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
So Bayer Monsanto hates organic, and Syngenta hates organic. So it's not that we don't have such powerful forces arrayed against us, but to talk about how I felt about it at the time, I didn't have what I would call a very developed political awareness. I was just kind of looking for the party and a life with some meaning. We weren't a bunch of farmers when we started. I actually grew up on a farm, but most people couldn't even start a tractor. And we were finding a new way of doing things because it was clear that the old ways weren't working. It was clear we had been lied to. It was clear that we didn't like the outcomes of that old path. And I think that I don't want to over-glorify it. We were just people, and we happened to be at that point in this cultural wave, and we did a lot of screwed up stuff. But we also thought new thoughts that were important, and I think are still important, and that those thoughts are still developing much later.
I remember Elliot telling the story of him going to the library to peruse how to grow and what kind of strategies, crop rotation, this, that, whatever. Just nothing existed.
That's right.
And then he would debate with these extension agents and university professors, and they would try to disclaim.
Yeah.
And it's so different from now, where you can go to the Market Gardener Institute and have a class, and it's
right.
like everything's available. Back then, it wasn't.
Elliot was, you say, well, Elliot and I are like the same, but we're not. Elliot was 12 years before me. And at that point, I've talked to people who were in academia who came to organic, and they said, no, I think these guys got some good stuff here. Mm-hmm. And, Stuart Hill from Canada, from McGill, and I won't remember everyone's name, but it was hard. If the guy who became Bob, who became the first soil scientist at Rodale, he was from, I think it was University of Maryland. When he went back to the university for something, and he'd walk along the hall, and his former colleagues would go to the other side of the hall.
He was discredited
and look away. They thought it was terrible what he was doing.
Oh my God!
It was anti-science is how they felt about it. And, they paid a hard price. Some of those early pioneers had to be pretty rugged people. Mm-hmm. And they weren't always the easiest people to live with.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were pretty rugged. They had to, I don't care what everyone tells me, I'm going to do it because I think this is right.
A real contrarian.
A real contrarian. Yeah. Elliot's a real contrarian. He's not hard to live with, but he certainly is somebody who's got a great willingness to follow his passion wherever it leads, and he doesn't really care what everyone else thinks. So I think that those early people, and this isn't just particular to organic agriculture. My wife was a mathematician. She left that long ago, but she wrote a book about women in mathematics, and it was the same. It's like the very early adopters, the very first women who went into this totally male, hostile environment. It was hard. They were treated badly. People didn't like them and didn't want them there. And then the next generation were accepted a little more, and they could kind of get along. And, now the current generation of women in mathematics almost has no idea what we're talking about. They go, I don't encounter any ceilings. My department chair is a woman. Half the students are women. What are you talking about?
Well, that's always how I've felt.
Right.
With my practice. It's like I've never had to fight to demonstrate that my food was somehow better. It's just I go to market and people come and people know about organic and they buy it and then I
That's
supply.
success. That's success.
You know,
Yeah.
it was always like that for me. Like
Right.
I felt that, yes, starting farmers market, yes, developing the models, but it was never something that I needed to convince people that organic was somehow better for them. It was there.
The thing that I think is easy to forget is that it's still a movement, and we are not there yet, right? In America, 7% of the food is organic, is certified as organic, and I'm sure there's another 2% that's not certified, right? And I'm sure the 2% of what is certified I wouldn't call organic. So we can have that, but we have a long way to go to take over the food system. And to make it that Lindley just came back from Biofach in Germany, and she said, it's amazing over there. They have supermarkets, like large chain supermarkets, where everything in the store is 100% organic.
Yeah.
These aren't like
Wow.
co-ops. These are like supermarkets.
Yeah.
And we can't even imagine that. You go to Whole Foods and you go, oh, thank goodness, 10% of it's organic.
It could have been.
It could have been.
It could have been. It could have been.
been.
Because I go to these stores in France also, they have them, but it could have been.
Yeah. And
But it isn't.
and it could be. We have a long way to go to that, though.
You think Whole Foods could be 100% organic?
I don't know if it'll be Whole Foods. Maybe it'll be somebody that puts them out of business. Right? That's why I'm saying we're still in a movement, and we need to build the movement. These issues are real. These are not, Joan Gussow talks about, she would go and testify to Congress, and the New York Times would say, Joan Gussow, food faddist, right? They would call her a food faddist because she believed in whole foods, and she believed in organic food. And it's so derogatory and dismissive, that attitude. And it's not by mistake. It's like there are a bunch of professionals thinking about what to call Joan Gussow to make it seem like what she's saying is
It's
silly, stupid, this religious fervor of these whack jobs who are promoting alternative food. Well, it's not. It's total sanity. It's backed up by science. But, she doesn't have a marketing department.
Yeah.
And the people she's against have large marketing departments. And when someone gets old or tired, they hire somebody else. It's okay.
Yeah.
When Joan gets old and tired, you've lost a national treasure.
There's also huge parts of the scientific community itself that are very unconvinced of organic.
Funded by
I know.
chemical industry.
But it's amazing how many of them there are, and actually in the fitness industry, which is part of my past. I was always so surprised at the amount of hate sent towards organic, because these were people that wrote a lot about nutrition, and they just said there's no difference in the nutritional value, blah blah blah. It's a scam. And I'm like, once I got into farming,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just so obvious that, well, for one, I think just they were missing the point in a lot of ways, because they were only considering human health, which, yes, it's still a huge part, but it's like they were missing the other aspects
yes,
of it that
yes,
had to do with environment and the system and the food system. That didn't matter. To them, the industrial food is fine. Food is
Right.
there on the shelf. I'm good. We're good.
Right. Well, we aren't good.
Yeah.
This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. Tessier has always been one of my top choices for greenhouses and tunnels. For over 45 years, they've been manufacturing high quality and incredibly strong structures right here in North America. Their products can withstand the heavy snow loads we faced here in the Northeast, and their prices are among the best in the market. Tessier offers excellent service and expertise, always ready to help with customized solutions. I particularly appreciate their commitment to innovation and their willingness to listen to the needs of growers. At the Old Mill, we use several of their Gothic Caterpillar tunnels and micro tunnel for season extension, and I'm always impressed with their design and build quality. Without companies like Tessier, food sovereignty just wouldn't be possible. So thank you, Tessier, for helping us growers feed our community year-round. You guys rock.
Use promo code MGI10 for 10% off your first order and free shipping in select regions.
Running a farm takes so much more than just growing food. There's the website, the email, the billing, the customer questions, and if you're like me, you're probably feeling the weight of it all. That's why I want to tell you about Farmhand. Farmhand is an all-in-one virtual assistant built for CSA farmers. It handles the back office, things like website, newsletters, weekly add-ons, flyers, QR code, member support, even billing, so you can focus on what matters, the farm and your community. So if you're in the thick of the season and feeling stretched, or maybe your signups didn't quite go as planned, take a moment to explore Farmhand. Through this podcast, Farmhand is generously offering a one-on-one strategy session for any one of you out there that might need their help. Check out farmhand.partners/podcast to book that session with them. It's totally worth it, guys. Check them out. What do you think? I'm asking all these big questions. I hope you don't mind, Dave.
I'm having a good time, John.
I'm having a good time too, and I appreciate you being here. Chris and I were doing this podcast, and we have a lot of guests that come in, share their insights, what they do. But I think we do think that the solution moving forward is a decentralized food system with a lot of small farms everywhere, occupying territory, feeding local communities. To keep it to the simplest form, this is what Chris and I believe is the best outcome for the future of the food system.
I agree.
You agree?
I do. It's not going to be just that, but I agree. That's the best outcome. That's the thing to work for. I agree. I agree that the decentralization shouldn't just be of the food system, it should be of every system. That we are healthier, saner, happier. I do agree with Small is Beautiful. Do you guys know that book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aware of it.
A lot of people don't know it anymore, but E.F. Schumacher, Fritz, right? He wrote that book, and the subtitle is Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered.
Right.
And there it is. And he lays it out pretty clearly. I agree. I think that small is beautiful, and food as if people mattered. That'll probably be the name of my book, right? The Real Organic Project, Food as if People Mattered.
Yeah.
And all of these things, we go to scale and centralization because it's easy for a few people to make a lot of money that way.
Yeah.
It's not because it's better quality anything. It's
for money.
It's for money.
And only for the
money.
few people.
And so here's the interesting thing. Okay, we talk about capitalism. This is very interesting. In capitalism, decentralization is key to it really functioning the way that people, like Adam Smith
The magic
imagined it.
hand for market. Is that?
The magic hand for market, but it works if it's decentralized. Then the market says, we want some blueberries that taste good that aren't covered in poison. And Hugh and Lisa Kent go, we have those. And the market goes, great, we'll pay more for those. Right now, the market in America says, we don't want them. We don't care if they taste better. We don't care if they don't have any poisons on them. We don't care if they're literally bring greater health to the people who eat them. We want somebody who can supply us year-round with an uninterrupted supply so we don't have to fuss. And guess what? We are consolidated 6 giant chains in America. We're all owned by one company. And so one giant company talks to another giant company. And this was in the beginning of Austin Frerich's wonderful book. What's Austin's book? Barons. And it's about these individuals, it's families who kind of run our food system.
Cartels.
They're cartels.
Yeah.
And he goes, there's a coffee cartel, and there's a beef cartel, and there's a pig cartel, and there's a berry cartel. So Driscoll's is in there, and Walmart is in there. So there's a store cartel. And in the forward to that, the guy who wrote Fast Food Nation, and he's writing about Adam Smith, and he's quoting Adam Smith, and he's saying that the one great enemy of capitalism is monopoly. Now we'd have to think about that. So they're saying capitalism itself will encourage monopoly, but monopoly will kill capitalism. Okay, now capitalism is starting to sound like some kind of Marxist scheme.
Yeah,
right?
It looks interesting.
It looks interesting.
I think that the Rockefellers fell under that at one point. If you study history, they were consolidating all the markets.
Absolutely.
And they were, the government said, no, this is a monopoly. We need to break it down. And
Yeah.
The government several times have taken huge steps. I think that one was probably the Sherman Antitrust Act that caused the breakup of Standard Oil. I'm not positive which one. There were several anti-monopoly acts passed back in the day when people, the Gilded Age, I don't know when that was, 1890 or something, and that was a time much like this time. Incredible division, a small number having unbelievable wealth, and a lot of people having a hard time living in poverty. And ultimately, they happened to elect, almost by mistake, Teddy Roosevelt, and he became the trust buster. And they really changed things. For a long time, things were changed. Now they've gone back, and they've set aside that under Reagan, they set aside the Sherman Antitrust Act. They reinterpreted it. They haven't said the law doesn't exist. They just said we call monopoly when the act of consolidation of a producer or a retailer results in higher prices.
okay.
So as long as you're keeping the prices down, we'll give you the power to run the government and our lives.
No, that's a problem there.
Yeah, it is a problem.
You talked earlier about we didn't know 10 years prior what happened 10 years later, and it was a big change.
Yeah. Let me think what I was talking. Which
But
10 years?
Just to say that, could we be surprised in what could happen in the next 10 years? Could there be some force out there that reshapes agriculture for it to be decentralized? Is that a pipe dream? Is that something that we could foresee?
I can't foresee it, but I can hope for it. I think that, I've quoted that one night I was driving Joan Gussow home after a dinner at Stone Barns, and she asked me, we're driving across the Tappan Zee Bridge, and it's beautiful. I always was terrified of the Tappan Zee Bridge, this place, you go, and all these cars, and I breathed a sigh of relief when I got to the other side. But I was going across at night, and it's all lit up with blue lights, and there's no cars on the road. I'm like, this is great. And Joan said, do you have optimism about what you're doing? And, I know that Joan actually thought about this a lot because she had spent her whole life fighting these hopeless fights. And I said, no, I don't. I said, but I have hope. And she said, yeah, that's good, right? So optimism that things will turn out in a positive way, no, but it's possible. And I think we can't predict the currents of human change. We can see where things are at now, and they're a little terrifying. But who knows? I mean, I think that we have already a huge wave of ill health and cancer and heart disease and so many problems from our diet. I don't think there's any question but that it's from our diet. So at some point, all the moms and the dads are going to go, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I won't tolerate it anymore. And then, people like you guys and me and everybody spreading the good word that it doesn't have to be this way. We can eat good food and we will be happier and we will be saner and we will be healthier in every way.
I know I'm talking a lot, Chris, and I please interject. One thing that's keeping me hopeful is I have a 21-year-old. So I've been kind of observing a very much younger generation, and they don't drink alcohol.
Yeah.
They don't drink and drive. They don't, they party once in a while, but it's not like when I was a kid. And for me, that's like, there's something there because, just understanding that alcohol is a poison and then if you consume it regularly, it's a problem.
Yeah.
I think there's an awareness there about health. And I haven't seen in these kids the connection of soil and deep down, but I can imagine that some of them will go there.
Right.
And so somehow I'm like, they don't get the organic, but they get the non-alcohol. And then, so I'm thinking that, we might be surprised about some popular choices that might just flip like that and say, okay, we want to eat from healthy soils. And then our work becomes relevant,
Yeah. So we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
One of the problems is that we succeeded to the degree that we became boring to a younger generation. Because
Interesting.
it's like, oh yeah, organic. It's like I go into every supermarket. There's organic. My parents are all
It's
into
not
it.
radical and hip anymore.
It doesn't feel like theirs. They want it to be their thing.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, except what I see is like, so a lot of them are going regenerative. Okay. Now that I'm regenerative and I'm going like, okay, I completely love what you mean by that. But you are being used as shrubbery, that's planted around the mansion by Syngenta and Cargill and Pepsi and McDonald's and Bunge. And somehow that has come to be presented by the marketers. There's a reason that...
By Hollywood.
It's a reason that it's blowing up. And some of it is it's got fueled by really good intentions and a desire for... We've got to deal with climate change, and agriculture has to be a part of it, absolutely. But these guys are going, great, we can say we're regenerative and we really don't need to change much of anything, right? We're not going to stop making and selling toxic substances to spray on crops. We're just going to say no-till.
No-till.
Right. And
obvious. It's so obvious.
It's so obvious to us, but it's not obvious necessarily to young people. And when there was a great, there was a listening session at Eco Farm a couple of years ago, and it was a real organic listening session, and there were about 25 people in the room. I loved it. Everyone's sitting around, they're going around, everyone's introducing themselves and saying why they were there. And this one young woman gets up and says, well, I'm going to say something that I don't know how you receive, but I'm from Kiss the Ground. And I just think that we all want the same thing. And can't we work together to get it and not be at cross purposes?
She said that or you said that?
She said that. She said that.
Okay.
Right? Because she's at an organic conference and she's at the Real Organic listening session. And she felt that organic was turning away from the regenerative movement. And so we went around the room and we came to another young woman, a few years older than the first one. She was a mom and she ran an organic farm with her husband. And she explained that and she said, when I watched Common Ground, I felt personally assaulted by that film. Because it doesn't mention the word organic once. The major world movement that is challenging the chemical beast. And it wasn't mentioned once. And it wasn't a mistake. Like a lot of the people who were interviewed talked about organic. It was always edited out. And the first woman looked like she had been struck. She was horrified. She didn't know that. She wasn't
aware.
She wasn't aware, right? So I just say that it's very effective because these are our friends. These are our friends in the regenerative movement, and they're also our enemies. And our enemies are paying for it. Like, who's paying the bill on this bar tab tonight? Oh, Syngenta is, right? Who's putting all these stories out in the press? Oh, McDonald's is, or Bayer Monsanto is. So I think that it's very confusing. As I say, if you're not confused, you're not paying attention.
I don't understand all these conferences because I'm on my LinkedIn feed. I'm seeing all these people going to these summits, and I know none of them.
Yes.
And I'm like, what is everyone talking about?
I've noticed that too.
And they're all super bright looking young people. Like, changing the food system.
Right.
I know none of them, and I'm wondering what are they. And I'm not complaining here. I'm just saying this is what I'm observing. Like, I'm questioning myself. Like, what are they talking about? Are they talking about people young people into farming? Are they talking about decentralizing the food system? Or what are they talking? I don't understand what they're talking about. They're not farmers.
They have jobs. They have health benefits. They make a decent living. I'm just saying there's a lot of money in this space. Who's paying for it? Who's paying the salaries of all these people going to these conferences and giving talks? I have, one of our supporters said, I really want you to talk at this Regen conference. And I said, sure, I'll talk at it. They won't love what I say, but that's okay. I'll just tell the truth. I won't be mean.
Yeah.
And I talked to some of the organizers, and they're like, yeah, well, we're not sure. And one of them said, we know you're right. And I wish it was 10 years ago and I'd chosen a different word.
Yeah, but now they're stuck with
But they're stuck with it.
Yeah, that's a thing.
It's okay. Look, this happens. It's happening to organic too. We have to fight for it.
Yeah.
Right? We have to defend our community. And if they want it to be real, they need to defend their community. And I haven't heard it yet. I'm like, well, where's the real regenerative movement? Because I don't hear it. Where are the people saying, no, we're not with them. Don't mistake us.
That's true.
We don't mean that. When we say soil health, we demand that it not include herbicides.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that when the decision happened with organic in 2016, 17?
2017.
That people were crying.
Yeah.
And that brought to my mind that this was deeply meaningful and it was enough to move people that much. I don't know why that stuck out to me. I guess some people might think, oh, okay, whatever. I mean, didn't go your way, but really crying about it. And what I want to understand is, what were the conditions that led to it being that deeply meaningful to people? And what I'm imagining is that it was people had given their entire life to this. There was people that had been around it for a long time. And if you could also connect that to kind of the origin of organic itself, why did this even become a thing in the first place? Why was it necessary? I'm sure some people that don't know any better might think, wasn't it all farming organic once upon a time? And
no, it never was all organic.
But people will say that.
Two questions. So let me do the first one first.
Absolutely.
So what happened at that meeting? These meetings are incredibly boring. The National Organic Standards Board, and it's like mostly they're making proposals about mostly really subtle picayune standard stuff, and then in the audience there's a bunch of lobbyists who are paid by different industry groups to try and promote why their product should be permitted. That's the norm. Very few farmers go to these things. I had never been to one. I barely knew what it was until we got into this. And then I started going to these meetings. And before it, there was this group called the National Organic Coalition, and they had their meeting the day before. And I went into that room, and there's 60 people sitting around a table. I didn't know any of them. I had never heard of any of them. Mm-hmm. And they all knew each other because they went to these meetings twice a year. And they were good guys. They were our team. They were not farmers. They were all people who worked for nonprofits, and it was their job to try and protect organic. And that's what they're trying to do. But this meeting was different. 60 farmers came to this meeting from around the country and got up and testified. It was, and these were Fred Kirshenman. Mm-hmm. Elliot was there. He wouldn't testify. He says, I won't dignify the USDA by speaking, but he spoke at the rally at lunchtime, right? And so this was a big deal, and all the nonprofit people were there, and they'd been fighting on this for years. And when we lost, it really freaked people out. I imagined that we were going to lose. That wasn't a surprise to me, but
some of them went in. Then
some of them went in.
We'll win.
Yeah, they really thought. Some of the farmers, some of the nonprofit people, and one of them afterwards, a nonprofit guy said to me, I just spent the last 10 years of my life trying to have some influence over the USDA in order to protect organic. And now I feel that all of that has been for naught and it's lost. And I thought, well, those are honest words. So that was the feeling and the energy of why this was. It was a big defeat because it was actually reversal. Nothing was passed, only something was defeated. But the fact that it was defeated was a reversal of 7 years earlier when overwhelmingly they said hydroponic cannot be called organic. All right. So that was that.
Yeah.
Now the other question was, how did we, where did organic come from?
Yeah, what were the conditions that created the necessity for an organic movement? I know, I've heard Eliot even go all the way back to 1840s, I believe. I think he was referencing something in France but I'm just wondering how, because like I said, there are people that think, wasn't it all organic? And I know you say no.
Yeah, that's what Alan Savory says to me.
Yeah.
Well,
so
Dave,
what were the conditions?
Organic farming has killed 6 civilizations in the world. Is that enough? And I say, Alan, that wasn't organic farming. Yeah. That was non-chemical farming. But that's not what organic means.
Exactly.
Organic farming is about exactly what you're teaching, which is about how do we protect the soil, care for it, love it like our mother, and help it to feed us. All right. The first thing that I know of, the first time I know that there was obviously a problem, I read this in Mark Bittman's book, was in, I think it was 1910, and George Washington Carver, who was a great organic champion, but not with the word organic, but he was a great advocate for organic farming. And he was teaching at Tuskegee University down in the South that he was teaching farmers. It was like an extension that they had created to reach out and say, you got to hoard your organic matter, always put it back in the soil. These are the ways you take care to keep the life in the soil. And these are crops you can grow and cover crop, all of that. He was teaching organic farming. It was not yet a political movement. He was teaching a way of farming in order to make a living in a sane way that they could make a living because it was sustainable. And there was somebody asked him if he would write something against the chemical companies, and he declined, and as being just a little too politically hot. And that wasn't his work, fighting the chemical companies. His work was teaching the farmers how to actually farm. Okay, that was the first. And then it kept building and building because the chemical companies kept growing and growing and coming more and more and defining agriculture until they managed, through their people in the back room who sat around and said, what can we call it so people won't freak out? Instead of chemical farming, we'll call it conventional, right? That's a real achievement to call that conventional.
Normal farming.
It's so abnormal. It's so unconventional. Okay. So, and that the organic movement really was born, in my opinion. Steiner was earlier, around 1920, I think. But Albert Howard in England was about the 1930s. He was still in India then, learning it from the peasants. He went to teach chemical farming, and then he went, oh.
I was farming for 40 centuries.
And farmers for 40 centuries in about 1910, 1920, King, who died, unfortunately. He worked for the USDA.
Yeah.
And he went and did this amazing tour. I read the book. I read all these books back when I was trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And I got them from Eliot. I got them from Jake Guest. And Jake described reading all these books, sitting there by his kerosene lamp, trying to write the first organic standards for the Northeast. And they didn't know. Jake didn't know. He was no farmer. And he's like, do we allow this? Do we do that? What is organic? We knew we wanted to be organic, but we weren't quite sure what it was. But what Howard and those people saw is it was a movement, a political movement, and they didn't invent the kind of farming, and they were the first to say so. He said he wrote a whole book about learning it in India, but they were the first to say, we have to find a better way. This other way is going to kill us. It's going to make us sick. It's going to make our soil sick. this is a better way. And they made it political. It was a political conversation. It was a movement. And actually, they weren't embracing certification. They were embracing farming differently and eating differently, so making the choice to eat that food. And out of that, and it's funny, in the early days, it was kind of the lords and ladies in England. I mean, it was an aristocratic movement. But when it came to America, that was certainly not part of it.
I read a lot about how Bob Rodale also was pioneer with his magazine.
Well, J.I. was the first one. Bob's dad.
Yeah, J.I. Yeah, the magazine was like the first.
Yeah.
It's like marketing.
Yeah.
Because it was marketing about organic, which was a big thing.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my best friend's mom read Organic Farming and Gardening and Farming magazine, and she was an organic gardener, and she grew incredible vegetables, and we would eat them, and she would make them. It was all delicious. You can't imagine that a bunch of kids thought this was good, but it was good.
Yeah.
And we did love it. And she was very much reading that magazine. That was kind of where she was getting her lead from.
You should start a magazine, Dave. The Real Organic Magazine.
It's a big project.
I would love that.
In my free time. Yeah, I know.
No, we should get a younger generation of like super stoked people to start that magazine.
That's right.
Because magazine is a good thing.
It is
you
good.
You go through it, there's tangible paper, you read it, you read people's thoughts.
Yeah.
I think we should...
Okay, I like it. I'll put that right next to, we need to get 1,000 chefs to join us.
Oh.
Right?
That was
Dan Barber's. That was, Dan Barber said, we were talking about 1,000 real friends, that we were getting people who were eaters rather than farmers to also support us. And Dan said, yeah, Dave, but 1,000 real chefs, right? You need to have chefs be part of it. And I said, oh, that's great, Dan. But once again, I said, I wonder which lifetime I'm going to get to that. But it's right.
Oh, they're great advocates, and they have the spotlight.
They have the microphone.
Yeah, super popular, and
I agree.
Most of them care.
I agree.
If the USDA tomorrow did a reform, kicked out hydroponic and CAFOs, and just went right back to what it was before, where would you turn your attention to next? Because I imagine, that kind of issue that spurred on the Real Organic would... I mean, of course, there's still a lot of problems. So what I'm trying to say is, what would be then where you would really turn your attention to? Because it wouldn't be to reform organic standards. Not that it is currently. You have the label.
Yeah, we're not working very hard at reform. Not that I'm against anybody doing it.
So I guess, what
would we do? How would the world be different?
Yeah.
I'd be very happy for a couple of days. That's how victory is. You're happy for a couple of days. Defeat, you're miserable for a lifetime. But I would just work on celebrating the good, because as I say, we still need to build a movement. Even if the USDA embraced us and said, we love you, we'd say, great, now spend your money to promote this, to teach people, to help people to transition, to help people get to market, to help this, I agree, to help, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let this spread like wildfire. So I think there's a lot of work to do. We know that, I believe that farming has a huge impact on climate. I believe it has a huge impact on democracy. Mm-hmm. I think it has a huge impact on health. And I think that for all these things, we actually want to bring everybody with us, right? And the truth is, if Cargill and ADM and Bunge are thriving, then democracy, as I believe in it, will be threatened. It's just how it is. We need to have a vast web of farmers and eaters and the communities that come with that web. Mm. And then we get everything that we actually want. I'm not saying it can't go wrong, because it certainly can. And I look at Nazi Germany as an example of something that went horribly wrong. And it was a lot more decentralized than we are now. And actually, the Nazi Party embraced biodynamic farming until about halfway through the war, because Rudolf Hess, who was Hitler's second in command, embraced biodynamic farming. And the biodynamic community was divided.
Interesting.
Half of them said, no.
Never heard
Hello.
that story before.
I know, it's a big story. No, we're not going to support fascism. And the other half said,
It's power.
guys, this is our chance to take Germany and turn it into the agriculture to be biodynamic.
Interesting.
And so the community was very divided. And again, the ones who went with the Nazis, had the best of intentions. It was a deal with the devil.
Yeah, exactly.
And exactly. And they said, yes, but we're going to get what we're working for. And the other one said, that's not what we're working for. We're working for a community, not just farming practices. What happened is Rudolf Hess stole an airplane and flew to England and jumped out in a parachute and was apparently trying to make his way to the royal family so that he could persuade them to make a peace deal with Germany. Allegedly, he did this without Hitler's permission. I don't know. But allegedly, he just went nuts. And they caught him wandering around in the dark on the countryside and arrested him. The English did, and they put him in jail for the next 10 years. And as a result of that, Hitler said, anything that was with that guy is out of here. So biodynamics is out of here. So the biodynamic community reunited. This is the story I've been told, and I've read a lot of research on it. And so at the end of the war, they could say we were against fascism, and certainly many of them were. And they probably all were, but
They were looking for how to
create that change.
Yeah.
And I think that they didn't think big enough. And, so...
Do you know if Rudolf Steiner was still alive at that time?
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't.
No. And I think he died pretty, in the 20s. I don't think he made it to the 30s. He died fairly young. And I don't know how he would have actually responded to it. He had his own personal challenges in this department. So, yeah, sorry.
This is different. I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I went to his hometown in Austria, and I'm interested in these things because there's something there.
Yeah.
There's something there.
Yeah.
I didn't know that story though.
Yeah.
So okay, so
Yeah, me neither.
there's a lesson here. There's a lesson here.
They don't include that story in your standard documentary about World War II and the Nazis.
No, the biodynamic people don't talk about it either, of course. They're embarrassed that any of them ever went there. But it was a big deal. Their Secretary of Agriculture, even up into halfway through the war, was a serious biodynamic advocate. He was serious. I'll tell you, do you want the grim story? Okay. So they had a biodynamic herb farm at Dachau. This is true.
Oh, wow.
Right? And they were growing biodynamic herbs to make drugs for the German army out of, and the people who were imprisoned at Dachau were forced to go out and work in the fields. And true story. We don't hear that one much either.
Yeah.
So we can see, and look, the reason that I think of this story and that I think it's important, and some of my friends don't think it's important, but I think it's important to remember what we're about, and that we have to see a really big picture about what we care about, what real health is. Mm-hmm. And, real health is not having the inmates of Dachau grow your herbs. It's not. It can't be. Even if they're doing everything perfectly biologically.
The energy's not right.
The energy's not right. And the world that you're creating is not right.
Yeah.
So it helps me because in the organic community, there are people who go, I've been told more than once, stay in your lane.
Oh.
I wrote a letter.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah, I wrote a letter about Black Lives Matter. And I said, look, I'm writing a letter from a very personal perspective today. I'm not speaking for the Real Organic Project, but I'm speaking of the father of a black son. And who I fear for when he drives around in a car.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the letter. It was a fine letter. And 50 people unsubscribed. 2 farmers dropped their certification.
Oh, wow.
And I got a letter from the founder of one of the major distribution companies. He was retired now, organic distributors in America. Said, Dave, stay in your lane. This is not our issue.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. For over 50 years, Johnny's Selected Seeds has been the go-to for so many commercial growers. Johnny's is an employee-owned company, and it takes great pride in offering seeds and tool that you can rely on because everything that they do is tested and trialed on their research farm. Out of the thousands of seeds variety tested every year, only a handful make the cut for the catalog. By the way, their catalog is the ultimate catalog. Getting it every year is like Christmas, and it's an amazing resource just to itself. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorite to grow, and check out their online growers library for thousands of free educational resources. It's all at your fingertips, friends. Johnny's, I love you guys. I've loved you for a long time, and I'm super happy that you're supporting this podcast. You guys are the best. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Belle Serre Inc. Belle Serre is a professional team specializing in the installation, maintenance, and repair of greenhouses and dome all across Quebec and Ontario. Whether you need help building a greenhouse that's too hard to tackle on your own or just replacing your plastic, the Belle Serre team has got you covered. I've worked with them on my last project, and I can tell you, friends, they're trustworthy, hardworking, skilled, and always attentive to their client. They're a bunch of young lads that are eager to make a difference. I really, really like them, and you can reach them on Facebook or Instagram, or simply by giving them a call. Yes, the phone still works today. 819-816-4620. A big thank to the team from Belle Serre for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You guys are truly a great team, and our agricultural community is lucky to have you.
And you know what? It's not about what you said. It's about the fact that you said it to those people. Most likely a lot of them. Meaning like they're like, oh, what are you trying to virtue signal or one of these things? And so it's...
Yeah, but everything's connected.
I know, but I'm saying that's what's so disappointing about it is that it's not even the actuality of what you said. The details, they might be like, I agree. But the fact that you're saying it makes me realize you're one of those people and you want to preach to me and stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane. Wow. That's not for me.
Yeah, so I think we shouldn't stay in our lane.
No. I want to drive everywhere. I want to see things.
It's intersections are where everything interesting happens.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Accidents. Sometimes.
And accidents. Accidents are interesting in a bad way.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up this idea to talk about the consumer in our movement because we've been talking a lot about, I guess, the farmers. And we had a woman on the podcast. It was a French podcast, actually, Julie Aubé, but she brought up a phrase, yes, but, and had a whole chapter in a book about it. And just the idea of the consumer is like obsessed with this. Yeah, but, yeah, I hear you, but, it's too expensive, but it can't actually feed the world. But I think most people probably would agree that economics is maybe the number one factor in that. But what do you see in terms of why is it that consumers are so stuck in this rut of just always saying, yeah, but...
And buying cheap.
This is a pretty big question for our species, especially for us in Europe and North America, because we do have I say we, many of us have a level of personal affluence that is unprecedented in human history. And we take it for granted again. So if we were to step back from anything in that, we go, oh, that's terrible. So how do we handle the fact that it's cheaper to grow food with slaves? right?
Exactly.
Right? How do we handle that? Maybe it's cheaper to grow food covered in poison short term. And it's definitely cheaper short term to go, I'm going to farm this field for 3 years and completely kill the soil, but I'm going to make a lot of money in those 3 years. So there are all these things where we go, is that too far for you? Is that too far for you? And there will come a point at which somebody will say, well, I don't care about that. But the first 5 things you mentioned, yeah, I agree. I can't support that. So I think we have to find a place where people understand that real food is completely in their own self-interest. It's not, don't eat this food because you're a nice person. You might be a nicer person if you choose to eat this food, but you don't have to be a nice person in order to eat it. You can be a jerk and still go, that's the food I want. And I think actually, probably a lot of the titans of industry in New York City who work in the financial industry, banking and all, at least have somebody else shopping for them, if not them going down to the farmer's market and getting great food.
For sure.
Because they're not stupid. They want to eat good food that tastes good, and they understand it's better for their health.
Yeah, I remember last time you were here, you gave us, I think, is the most revolutionary idea ever. And it was about just having transparency over, the practices of the food that we buy. It's like if we'd have like a little, iPad that was showing us how these cows are actually raised, then people would switch to organic overnight.
That's right.
And it's that opacity that's really creating the distance. Like people don't know.
Yes.
They just look at the price. They look at the product and the price, and that's the only information that they have. So product, price, that's it.
And one of the things that's happening now is often the food is grown somewhere else, meaning some other country, not just out of sight of
it's like another thing
of Quebec, but out of sight of the United States. So over 40% of our vegetables come from Mexico or South America, over 60% of our berries. Okay. Why is that?
Yeah.
We don't have climate for it? No. We don't have soil for it? No. The biggest single thing is that a worker in America will cost 20 times what a worker in Mexico costs. 20 times, right? So a worker in Mexico is making like $10 a day, long hours, $1 an hour. In California, in Florida, they're making 18, maybe 20 if they're H-2A and you have to pay for housing and travel and all that. So how is somebody in this country possibly going to compete? But it's not just about that. That's just the slam dunk, I'm sorry you're going to go out of business because I can find somebody to do this. I always go, did we talk about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire last time?
No, I don't think so. Or maybe. That does sound familiar now.
What is it?
The factory fire?
Yeah, the factory fire.
I know about that fire.
Yeah, it was a big fire. It was a big fire in New York City, and it was a little over 100 years ago. And it was in the Lower East Side. It was right off Washington Square Park, apparently. I didn't realize that, but somebody just told me that. And they'd lock the doors, and they were making shirt waists, right? Okay. And it was a thing that people wore back then, whatever. It was an item of clothing, and they had people working in the sweatshops, and they locked the doors because they didn't want people to go out and steal things. So they just locked them in. There was no OSHA. There were no laws, regulations around this. And they had a fire, and this gauzy fabric was very flammable. And the whole place went up, and these people were trapped on this floor, and it was like the fourth story. And they couldn't get out, so they went out to the ledge, and all they could do was jump and hope they survived because they were dying of smoke inhalation. All right. They all died. Nobody survived the jump. And the fire people were there with nets to catch them. They ripped through because they were moving too fast. This was a big, big deal in America, right? It happened right on, New York City. And people are walking by and they're taking pictures and they're lining up the bodies to try and ID them. And this changed America. And if it had happened in Nebraska, it wouldn't have changed America. But it happened in New York City. And one of the people who came and saw it was a woman named Frances Perkins. And she became a labor activist. And she ended up working for the governor of New York on creating safety standards. And then the governor, Al Smith, was replaced by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then he became president. And he said to her, "You are my labor secretary in New York. Would you like to be the U.S. labor secretary?" And she said, "Well, Franklin, only if you mean it and will let me do it for real, right? I'm not here to be a symbol." He said, no, I'll back you up. And he said, "Do you really think we could do it?" And she said, "I think we can do it, but you got to mean it." And he did mean it, and they did change the laws a lot. And so it became much safer to have a job in America, a factory job, right? And that's an amazing story about what happens when people are paying attention.
When they see.
When they see it.
Yeah, when they see it.
Now, the cheap clothing, and it's very cheap, very inexpensive, our clothing, is made in Bangladesh and places like that. And people are still dying every week in little factory fires there. And we don't see it, and we don't care. And it's not because we're bad people. It's just you can only care about so much stuff that you can't see. But if somebody in your town and you went down and the bodies were lined up on the sidewalk, you'd go, "Oh, that's it.
That's it.
No
Everything
more.
stops. This is what we need to solve right now.
This is it. This is not going to continue." Okay? So we have this problem, which is that almost everything is made somewhere else, and food is grown somewhere else. So if you took one of those vegetable places growing hydroponic blueberries in Mexico and put it next to your house, you'd go, "That's
Whoa.
it." And the people who were working there weren't even Mexicans. They're from Central and South America because they can't get Mexicans to do it that cheap. So they have to get the most oppressed,
Oh my God.
helpless people to come and do the work, or they're indigenous. So we can change things with awareness, but we are exhausted by there's so much information available. And that's our movement.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't throw anything on the nightly news and expect the world to see it anymore.
No.
In fact, I mean, even if you have millions of people watch, it's nothing anymore.
It's nothing anymore.
It's like, oh yeah, that happened yesterday. 1 million people watched. Next day, next thing.
Yeah.
So
Seriously,
that's very hard.
if you're in your 20s, it's time to get to work. Like, we need to expose these things, and people should refocus on these issues. This should be of when you're young and you want to change the world, this is what you should be working on.
But I agree with you completely, JM. And it's a call to arms to all young people. But I also love Bill McKibben's call to arms.
Tell us.
He's calling to arms old people. He's saying,
Come on out.
he calls it the third act.
Okay.
He's saying, you know what? We're old. We're retired.
Yeah, you have time.
We're not broke. Do you remember what it was we cared about when we were 20? Because most of us did.
Yeah.
He said, well, it's the third act. It's time to keep caring and to show it and to become activists. The third act is the third activist. So
I like that.
McKibben is good.
I like that too, because it's sort of, you could parallel that with the idea of the fact that grassroots and top-down approaches, I think both are in a way necessary a lot of the time.
That's
when
right.
You only have one, it's the same story over and over again. It ends up in a roadblock. But when you pincer move and you come from both sides, you squeeze the middle and...
Imagine if we got together, what we could do.
The raging grannies.
That's right.
I love
the raging
I want to be
grannies
this in
and
another few years.
And the angry adolescents, put them together.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I think because I'm an optimistic, I think we're going to come back to these issues. I think that we went a bit sideways. There were other issues that were raised. I think it was anyway. I just think we'll come back to it. I think these are the real issues of our world right now.
That's right.
Food.
And food is the place where it all comes together. It is the
Yeah.
crossroads where everything goes through there. It's the spice road. You know, this is it. It's like, because everybody has to eat. That's not optional.
Yeah.
And there really isn't anything like it.
Yeah. I want to switch gears to talking about takeaways from your podcast. And I ask because you've had so many interesting conversations with people and have learned a lot. Maybe you don't remember it all. That's fine. But I just want to ask you some about certain topics, and you just tell us some of the best takeaways and most interesting things you've learned about that.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. But no pressure if you can't remember details. But what's the best you've heard about human health lately in the organic world? Like, maybe it's about nutrient density. Maybe it's, I think you had Tina Owens, was her name?
Yeah.
Talk about nutritional dark matter. And
that was an interesting interview.
so I would like to hear some about that.
Yeah. You know, I have another one coming up, William Lee. I'm going to interview him. And he's very good. He's a hitter. And his understanding of health is basically Albert Howard's understanding of health. It's just he has a whole lot of science. He's a hitter. He's taught at a lot of very fancy university med schools. But seeing as I haven't done that one yet, although I'm connecting with him. But I can talk about what came up with Tina. And Tina and I are not in perfect alignment. So Tina very much embraces the regenerative movement, and great. She believes in scale. And by that I mean, you know, she would look at what you did or I did.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not important, is what she would say.
Too small.
It's too small. We don't have time. We need to scale this. So we need to talk to Godzilla.
I disagree with that so much.
Tell me. I would like to hear.
I don't want to.
Okay. This afternoon, you'll tell me.
Exactly.
Okay. So I don't agree with it at all either. And I think another interview I did was with Will Rosenzweig, and he's an educator. He started the Republic of Tea, that company, and then he sold it. He started another company, sold it, and then he just teaches at Berkeley, and he's semi-retired now, but he does great stuff. And he said, you know, the answer is not to figure out how to scale it. It's to figure out how to replicate it. Right?
Exactly.
We need 1,000, 100,000, not how do we turn it all into one? Because when you do, it always turns into crap. So that's the problem with people, in my opinion, who think that we can only do this by working with General Foods and with, Walmart, and which is, a very tempting thing to go. I could go to Davos and have some influence with those people, but I don't believe it's the answer. I don't want to go to Davos. My wife doesn't want me to go to Davos. So I think that the answer is to build a movement. And I understand that it's easy to look at that and go, oh, that's silly, but I don't think it's silly. So that was a difference that we had.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot from her. I thought she's very interesting. And yeah, her nutritional dark matter. So just what she was saying about that was she was talking about the biocompounds, the secondary metabolites in plants. And gosh, not that long ago, it was big news that there were like 40 or 50,000 of them. Well, now they are, in peer review published articles saying 200 to 300,000 compounds that they're identifying. They haven't named most of them. They don't know what most of them do.
That's crazy.
Right? That's why they call it nutritional dark matter. But they've stopped.
That's a bizarre name.
Oh yeah, some guy from, I can't remember.
Why would you name it that?
It was a good name.
Dark matter?
Dark matter means
Kind of like it.
you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
but they could have unknown matter, or just
Yeah, but we remember dark matter. It's a good name. It's a good name. But what's interesting is they've moved. They used to just call them secondary metabolites, and what they meant by that was they're completely unimportant. They don't serve any function. We don't know what they do, but if we take it out, nothing happens to the system. And now they're going, you know what? everything matters. We get it. We don't understand how it matters most of the time. We don't understand how two, of these biocompounds will interact with each other. We don't understand how they will interact with our many, many compounds, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them we make, some of them we can't make, we need to take in. Some of them are anti-carcinogens, some of them are carcinogens. We don't understand it. But the point being, we believe now, and we meaning people who have, this has been their life study, and I'm not talking about, God bless them, the people who were out there just in the wild, looking around and observing reality and going, okay, I think this is what's real. I'm talking about people who actually were doing science as the way to find the right answer, but it's not the only way to get to the answer. It might, in some cases, it's not the way to get the answer. But I think the point is we're now understanding that we don't understand, but that we ignore the system at our peril. Mm-hmm. If we want real health, we need to figure out how to get food that has that stuff, and we have to look at the soil in order to figure that out.
So simple. Like can't go wrong.
It's so simple, and you can't go wrong, but there will be a lot of people who are paid a lot of money to convince everyone that that's not true, or that, you're just a food faddist, JM.
A food faddist.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
I know.
God.
I tell this story sometimes. Paul Hawken, who is a friend, and he talked about the early days when he was at Erewhon in Boston, which was the first organic food distributor. And he said, they would trot him out and have him be in these public debates with Dr. Frederick J. Stair, who was the head of nutrition at Harvard.
Oh, my God.
Harvard had a Department of Nutrition.
And he was fighting against him?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
And this guy was head of the department for like 40 years. Okay. So they would have these debates, and Paul said, I lost every debate, and I was always right. Right? And that's really important to remember, which is that somebody can have compelling alleged proof, and it doesn't mean that it's right. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't be discouraged just because somebody else seems to have proof that you don't have, mm-hmm. because the proof is often manufactured, it's often paid for by the very people that you're saying have it wrong.
Plato used to talk about that. That's how he got killed. Sophisme, we would say in French. Like, these are arguments that are all correctly structured, but they're false. And you can't argue against that because...
They didn't like it when he said that?
Well, he was trying to say that's exactly what's going on, and no one's paying attention. And that's so true today. Marketing, in many ways, can be that. Yeah.
It can be good, but it is often bad. Mm-hmm. And because of that strange economic proposition where money tends to consolidate, Zephyr Teachout was one of the interviews I did. She wrote Break 'em Up. She was an anti-monopolist. And she said one of the things about monopoly is that another way in which that invisible hand concept is broken is that the big companies, will now use their money not to find better ways to do things, but to further monopolize the market. So they spend their money on influence and on shelf space, getting exclusive shelf space so somebody else isn't even allowed on the shelf. And that is completely contrary to the ideals of capitalism.
Yeah, free market capitalism.
Free market. That's not a free market.
Because then it's just saying that it doesn't even matter about doing it better. We're just going to be the only option. So you'll have no choice but to go through us. It's like Amazon in a lot of ways. Like, there might be another place where you can buy the thing, but Amazon's like, yeah, but guess what? It's going to be cheaper with us and easier. So
it is. It's cheap and easy. It's very hard to resist.
So the podcast, Dave, is how do you, I haven't listened to it. I'm guilty of that, and I will. So who are you inviting? What are your metrics, or who are you interested in this podcast? Are they farmers? Are they food advocates? Are they contrarians?
Yes.
All of
those, and scientists and politicians and authors and one of the things that I've tried to do in the podcast is to triangulate and look at organic from all these different perspectives. Because if you try to dumb it down, it just becomes platitudes, really. And I'm like, well, let's look at this. And that's why, the people I've mentioned are very different, and they wouldn't necessarily even have heard of each other or listened to each other, but they understand something very clearly from one point of view. And it all goes back to the central crossroads. So marketing, okay, Seth Godin. I interviewed Seth Godin twice. He's a brilliant, wonderful, ethical marketer.
He's on Tim Ferriss a lot, Seth Godin.
Oh, yeah, Tim loves him.
Seth Godin is a big name.
Yeah. Although most of the farmers have never heard of him. And we interview farmers.
Yeah.
So we never want to leave them out of the conversation. They need to be in the conversation. And we pick different farmers. And I actually wish, we do it every week. So we've got over 200 episodes out, and I don't know, maybe a third of them are farmers.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe a quarter. But we're even talking about doing a separate farmer to farmer podcast that would just be all farmers. Yeah. Well, Chris Blanchard, our hats off to him.
That would be a nice homage to him.
Yeah. He was
People really
great.
liked that podcast.
They liked it.
They liked him. They liked that podcast.
I was on it once, and I said, well, Chris, I'd love to do it if I can talk about real organic. He goes, I want you to talk about tomatoes. I'm like, I said, I'll tell you what, 50-50, right? Half tomatoes, half real organic. We went, okay, we shook on it.
Okay.
It's funny. I went on his podcast also. It was a really nice time. And it was, I don't know how to say this without sounding fluky, but it was the first time that I was realizing that I was, a public personality because he was saying, it's JM Forte. And he was so an advocate about it. I'm like, what's the big deal? It's just and he made me realize that my name was floating aloud out there. He was such a great guy.
Yeah. No, I know. He was really mourned, and no one's quite done what he did. It's different people are doing versions, but he had something that was very simple and pure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was farmers.
Yeah,
he's talking.
What about environmental health? What's some takeaways from your podcast that in
environmental
regards to
health? Let me think about that. Give me some more hints about what we mean by environmental health.
Not just I asked before about human health, but what about impacts of agriculture on the environment? Are there new things that we're learning that people are sharing with you that are, or repeated things that are just need to be reminded? Okay.
Well, Al Gore was certainly.
He was on the podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we want to have him on.
Yeah. He was, he's very knowledgeable, and he was knowledgeable. It was interesting. He was more knowledgeable about the impact of climate on agriculture than he was about the impact of agriculture on climate.
Interesting.
So that was a whole new perspective for me. I mean, he had a worldview, and he'd talk about the flooding here and there and how it hit them, and the drought over there and how it hit them. So that was very interesting. Okay, let me go back to this. We had a whole symposium session on climate. I'm trying to think who we talked to. Certainly Bill McKibben was one of our guests. And again, he was talking about it, but less about Paul Hawken. Okay, Paul is probably the most prominent person.
That's his message.
Yeah, big on climate and regeneration of our planet, and he means it with a big R and a real R, not a small corporate R. And
I like that, by the way. Small corporate R. I love that.
I know. He talks about how the corporations, they take good words and turn them into what he calls weasel words, like sustainable.
Yeah.
And Paul has talked, he talks a lot about the impacts of agriculture on climate. And he just has a new book just out called Carbon, which I highly recommend to people.
Interesting.
Very interesting, very rich. Love story
Because he was one of the first one to link those two things, climate change and farming and carbon.
Yeah.
Probably has a different perspective about this now, considering everything that happened in the last 15 years.
Right. It's interesting.
Climate smart farming being.
Oh, well, the phrases, the weasel words again.
Yeah.
You know, and
I hate that.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that. Michael Pollan, I interviewed Michael a couple times, and we actually didn't agree about regenerative agriculture. So I thought it was really interesting, that conversation, because he said, well, you know, organic was really about addressing chemicals in our food, but regenerative is about addressing climate change. And I said, Michael, why do you think that? You know, well, they say that's what it's about. I say, well, that's just a marketing thing. I mean, when it started, it wasn't about that. Regenerative, when the Midwest farmers, the Gabe Browns of the world, embraced it, they didn't care about climate. They cared about making a living as a farmer and using less inputs. And let's
and building
take
soils.
and building soils, absolutely. So let's take a lot of the great stuff from organic, call it our own, fine, and then they went, well, you know, a lot of scientists are saying maybe this is good for climate, so they embraced that, and it became the marketing point. But I said, well, what about if you use herbicides on your soil? Do you think that's good for climate? Is that climate smart? And Michael said, well, no, that would be killing the soil. I said, well, that's what they do. And he said
he wasn't fully aware.
He said, look, forgive me. I've been working on drugs for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Coffee.
That's right.
Yeah.
Psychedelics, you know, lots of things. I mean, Michael is I got to say, he's brilliant and he's great. So he said, I need to research. I need to learn more. And I said, do you want me to take that out of the interview? And he went, yeah, well, if you want. I said, no, I'm asking, what do you want? He said, I guess leave it in. I said, okay.
All right, that's nice.
Yeah,
nice to hear.
I would love it if imagine he should write another food book.
I think he might.
He might. I could see that, and I followed him through the years and seen. And it seems like we're ripe.
I think he's coming back to food.
Yeah.
I want to say something though. There's a moment in time where the right person with the right idea, things connect, and you can't command that. You know, like it's just that the omnivore's dilemma was exactly the perfect storm for everything.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he writes another book, it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It would be hard for it to be that.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay.
He's still an enormously talented writer.
He is, and researcher.
Exactly.
Yeah, and researcher, but the guy can write.
Yeah.
You know, he wrote, have you ever seen that article he wrote about industrial organic, a long time ago?
I'm pretty sure I've read that.
It's
Sounds
a good
familiar.
article. I really recommend it. And you can just Google it, and Michael Pollan and I don't know what else, but just about, about industrial organic. And he wrote about these companies coming in, and is this what we meant by organic?
Yeah.
And he's really good.
No, you should write about that.
He
should write something that would not make him popular.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting book that I would like to read. Not because he's just, anyway.
Good, I'll tell him that.
Tell him that.
My favorite book of his is A Place of My Own.
Yeah.
Do you know that one?
No.
It's all about architecture and building, actually. Like, he dove deep into architecture and the thinking behind what does the shape of a window do to your brain and what you see out the window. It was pretty...
So true.
Yeah.
And I loved it. Anyway.
Are you going to be having a guest that's going to talk about gluten intolerance on your show and the epidemic of that?
I will ask William Lee about that. That'd be a good topic for him.
Has it come up before?
I do think that's one of the...
Maybe with Bob Quinn.
That's one gateway
to
get the public aware of farming and chemicals. And you go to Europe, everyone that I know that's gluten intolerant, we go to Europe
and then they're okay.
We have great croissant and bread, and there's no problem there. Everyone's happy.
That's great.
A lot of people have that story of, I can't eat the food here, but I go there and then I can eat it.
That's great. Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of people are gluten intolerant, like a lot.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, I have talked to Bob Quinn about it, who's a grain farmer. And I might have talked to Mark Schatzker about it. I've interviewed him several times. So, but this sounds like a William Lee question, so I will talk to him about it. This will be a good one.
I do feel that that's like a Michael Pollan.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because there's probably one person out of 5 that has gluten problem or is aware of it, or it has affected a lot of people, especially young people.
Yeah.
And if they would understand why, instead of thinking that they're wrong, their system is wrong. Your system's not wrong. Your system is just, it's signaling you that you can't eat that food.
Yeah.
And it's because how it's produced.
It's being your friend.
It's being your friend.
Yeah.
And
so Jam, have you tried for friends here in Canada who are gluten intolerant to say, well, why don't you try to eat this bread, this wheat?
I think most of the wheats that are on the market, even the good breads, they're all...
Oh, I didn't mean buy a loaf of bread. I meant get some wheat and mill it.
Yeah.
And make your own
bread. Yeah,
bread.
but I think even getting the wheat, the DNA of the wheat now, it's hard to find. You know, I think that Dan Barber was working on these projects, but they've all been worked on.
Yes.
The DNA molecules of the wheat.
So you have to go to some heritage grains.
Yeah, you go to South America or you go to Europe with these not genetically modified grains.
Well, there's plenty of organic grain here, but the strands. I get it. That's really good. You know, so one of the people I interviewed was Dan Barber, and I asked him once, you know, you've talked about, you know, you love Mark Schatzker, and you both have talked about how our sense of taste is so screwed up because of the very polluted food that we get. How do you get people back to where they can trust their senses? Because Dan always says, oh, you know, good taste will save us. And I go, Dan, they're very good at fooling good taste.
Yeah.
You know, Doritos, you can't stop. I mean, that's the whole point.
It's pretty good.
They're pretty good at getting craving going, and you go, So I said, what would be the gateway food to get you back to being able to trust your sense of taste? And I was really surprised by his answer. He said, bread. He didn't think about it long. He said, bread. I said, bread. And then I thought, I've eaten the bread that they bake.
It must be fantastic.
It is fantastic. When I last time I went down to Stone Barns to interview Dan, and my wife, as I'm going out, says, don't forget the bread. Bring back some bread. And actually, it inspired me. I've been working on figuring out how to make a loaf as good as theirs ever since. I'm going to interview his baker, Eli. He's very good.
Well, you'll need to come back when the old mill is open, because we've started to make bread.
Yeah.
Have you tasted this new?
No, not the new.
Oh my God.
I'm growing my own wheat this summer.
All right.
Ah,
doing a first trial of that.
Yeah.
I've looked plenty into it. It's quite exciting.
Yeah.
I'm quite passionate about that.
All right. Next year we'll talk more about bread, because I love it. You know,
we're running 2 hours into this episode, Chris. What are we doing here?
I had one final question and then rapid fire.
Okay.
I wanted to know about a takeaway from the podcast in terms of cultural movement and social change. Have you had anyone that has spoken a lot about that aspect?
Yeah, sure. Well, Leah Penniman is the first one who jumps to mind, because she's so eloquent about agriculture as a social movement. And, you know, she has her own thing beautiful thing where they're trying to train, and not just train, but inspire young black people who want to go into farming, but they have no hooks for how do I get started. Yeah. And so they go to Soulfire, and, you know, they're just there for a week, maybe they're there for a summer. But so she's really working on it. She's one of the more eloquent people I ever met.
Oh, wow. That's something.
Oh,
wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I looked at her and I'm obviously like, wow. But that's
No, she's great. And she's really smart and really articulate. So it's a great combination. Let me think. Other people who have talked about it as a social movement. Obviously, Elliot Coleman and JM have both been on a number of times and see it clearly for that. It's hard for me to think of like.
Can I take back the
Yep.
question and rephrase it?
100%.
And was there like one episode where somehow you didn't get along really well with the guest, or like the it's like either the topic, the conversation, something wasn't connecting, or not in a bad way.
Oh,
like
you're asking. Just,
yeah.
You're
just
not
like,
thinking of one.
No,
just
I'm asking, like, was there an episode where just like, oh, we went there and you were surprised yourself? And
Oh, well, being surprised where we went, yeah, Dan Barber, we got along, but I thought it'd be so easy my first interview. I just read The Third Plate.
yeah, such a great book.
Oh, such a great book. And I thought, well, this will be the easiest interview I've ever done. And, you ask Dan a question, he's like, off over there. You go, whoa, Dan, wait, let me catch up. And then you get over there and he goes, over there.
We have one of those guys
we
too.
had one of those.
But it's really interesting, but we always went to places I never imagined.
Yeah. That's interesting, because the person that we have these conversations with is also a chef.
Yeah, true.
They got that wild zigzag ADD mind that's just going off. I have not done many hostile interviews where I don't agree with you. Let's talk about it. I haven't done much of that. And I've often wondered, should I?
Yeah.
And maybe we should do that more. And that would be interesting.
I'm not suggesting it.
No,
'cause
I know.
myself would not like to do that.
Yeah, I
because I'm not comfortable in that position. But
Right.
if you're looking for the truth, sometimes you need to confront ideas.
Yeah. Tina, I we have different attitudes and beliefs about scale and replication. So, and that was fine. And I knew we did, and she knew we did. And so we went into it, and she would say stuff, and I go, well, I just want to ask about that, and at the end of it, she said, wow, we really talked a lot more about organic than I thought we were going to, because we were going to talk about food as medicine, and which I find very interesting, but we ended up talking a lot about organic and regenerative. And so that was something where neither one of us quite expected to go there.
Yeah, I like those conversations. I mean, I think a good conversation should, at least a little bit, go somewhere you don't expect.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think we did that today.
Yeah.
I went some places I didn't see
know where
coming.
we were going.
And I have an idea of where I want to go, but
Yeah.
all right, rapid fire.
You remember that part, rapid fire?
I'm so bad at it. Okay.
No, it's all good. And
I'm really bad at it.
some of the
You have
questions,
mulligans, so
some
if
of the
you pass
questions
them, you
will
can.
be repeated, but I thought that actually would be interesting, because maybe we'll get a different answer, and
Yeah.
then it's interesting. I will change this question slightly. What's a book that has just been constantly coming back to your mind lately, that you keep coming back to? You're always thinking about it.
A book. It's funny. I'm not very rapid, am I?
No, it's not actually supposed to be rapid.
I read half of a lot of books
Oh, okay.
because I interview a lot of people and I want to read their book if they've got a book, but I don't have much time. I just got back from Florida. I made some questions for you, Jay, last night, late, because I didn't have time. So, I read Carbon, Paul Hawkins' book recently. Well, okay, the book, which is everyone should read if they can. The Garden, we've talked about it. That's a book that really surprised me.
Okay. Remind us the name of the author again? The Garden?
Matthew Ingram.
Matthew Ingram.
He wanted to come and talk to me, and I thought we were just talking about Elliot. He wanted some background because he was going to interview Elliot, and I said, great, come by. And we talked for 2 hours, and then he sent a copy of the book, and I'm in it. And I said, I didn't think I was going to be in this, So he was very nice. He really misdescribed me. He called me tall and rangy, and I thought, I don't think I'm either. But anyway, great book. Yeah, interesting.
It's going on my list.
Me too.
What's advice you heard when you were really young, but only appreciated a lot later in life?
Okay. I don't know. I might answer the same way before, but when I think about advice I got when I was young, I explicitly remember a lot of good advice from my godfather. who we were talking about going to college, and he said, when I was young, I applied to 3 colleges, and I'd seen 2 of them, and I hadn't seen the third, and I picked the one I hadn't seen because I didn't like the other 2, and I got there, and it was terrible. And he said, but it didn't matter. It doesn't matter where you pick. It doesn't matter where you go to college. It just matters what you do when you get there. And I thought that was pretty good advice, that don't be too obsessed with getting this or getting that. Look at what you do have and what you can make out of that. Alan Watts said something kind of similar to that, which is that he believes in the spirituality of accepting what is and what happens then. That whatever it is, this is what is, instead of going, no, that isn't it. I can't take that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a long answer for a short question.
No, it's good. What's advice you give often to people?
I try not to give advice. Eat good food. Yeah. I mean, that is something that I don't maybe say all the time, but I truly think that they ought to.
Why wouldn't you give advice? Is there like a spiritual practice behind not giving advice?
People don't really like getting advice mostly, and the ones who want it probably shouldn't get it. Telling people what to eat is a really good way to create a lot of resistance. And I think Margaret Mead said it's easier to talk somebody into changing their religion than it is to talk them into changing what they eat. And I think that that's true. And it's not that they won't change it, but it's hard to come from outside. And so, yeah, because I have what are considered in our culture fairly extreme food beliefs. I don't think they're extreme. It's like eat real food. And as I said to Michael Paul, so, I gave a talk at Churchtown last year, and I used Michael's koan, which is eat food.
Mostly plants.
And
not too much meat.
Not too much.
Yeah.
No,
Not
it's
too
just
much.
not too much.
Yeah.
And I wrote him, I said, Michael, I added a fourth line to that, which is mostly real organic.
That's it.
And he wrote back and said, yeah, that's a good addition. So that's good.
I like that.
Yeah.
What are people not talking about enough?
Well, in our very confusing times, it's hard to remember to be kind. There's so much anger from everybody. So it's nice to remember to be kind, even as we have to also disagree. I don't think it's wrong to disagree. We need to disagree, and we need to talk about those things. That was the purpose of the workshop that I was supposed to be giving with the head of CCOF out at Eco Farm, talk about hydroponics. And I got COVID. So after 5 years, I finally got COVID. And so I wasn't there. Lindley was there. But it was an attempt to have a difficult public conversation about that from 2 people who really disagreed. Yeah.
I would have liked to listen to that.
I would have liked to too. Well, we didn't get that chance. Lindley did a good job, but
Do you think anger is sort of normalized at this current moment in time in a way that perhaps, of course, if we look through all of history, there's always plenty of anger going around in humanity, but perhaps in more recent generations, there's been kind of a moment, it seems, of maybe less. I don't know.
Well, at this moment, I think people are scared. And I think fear leads to anger to defend ourselves. But I do think, of course, there's this thing about social media, which feeds on our extreme reactions. And they know, the algorithm knows it, so it keeps walking you out just step by step till you're way over here and you're really angry. And I am too. And I'm way out here and I'm really angry. And, so when I'm dealing with people, I try to take a deep breath and I actually tried to ask my angry parts to step aside and say, let me handle this. I got it. And I'll be with you afterwards. I'm not trying to get rid of you, exile you, but let me handle this. And that actually is what I do before I talk, if I have the wherewithal to remember to sit down for a moment.
It's funny because knowing you're one of the most likable person I know. So it's
well, you should hear the rest of me.
I'm gonna stay on your good side.
What's a nature experience that really sticks out in your lifetime?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was when I was a teenager and with a couple other teenagers, and we were camping in Colorado in the Rockies, very high, and we were on the top of a mountain and we huddled behind a little hut, and the wind was howling. I was snuggled up in a sleeping bag, and I loved it. It was just, pretty raw.
Were those early seeds of your future self, a love for nature? And
I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania, dairy farm, so I got to run around outside a lot. It was almost it would be a very unusual life for a young person now. Even if they lived on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania, they would spend a lot of their time on a device.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I read a lot of books from the past, and even in the early 1900s, a lot of people were speaking about the lost ways of life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even then, there was people saying, "Oh, we've lost the way of life of these rural places." And then I can only think now, and I get really sad when I think about those things, that the loss of a way of life.
Well, as the Buddhists say, we're going to lose everything. So, everything will keep changing. So that's just the deal.
What's something that you are really into at the moment, maybe even obsessed with, that is different from agriculture and organic, and just something else that interests you that might surprise
Fun
people?
fact about yourself.
Well, I might have said it last time. I do a lot of Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have my wife and a very good friend together. We all teach, and we practice together, the three of us, twice a week.
Oh, wow.
And then we each teach a lot. I teach like 3.5 hours every Saturday morning.
Wow.
And then, I used to practice a lot. Now I don't practice so much, but I got a little too busy with Real Organic and the farm.
All the more reason to practice, eh?
Yeah.
Center.
It's really good. It's so visceral. It's not intellectual, even though the mind is very present and showing up for it. But we have a really great teacher, a Chinese guy, and he teaches us things that are not readily available to the world. You can't really learn this from reading it. It has to be somebody helping you. So that's something that's meaningful to me. I enjoy the social aspect, which I didn't used to as much, but I enjoy getting together with people, but I also enjoy doing it alone. I think it really is significant for health as well. Mm-hmm. So I think food is the foundation, the critical, but our lifestyle and how we move our body, how we live in our body is a big deal too. The flow. Yeah.
Getting into the flow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave Chapman, it was a great conversation. Thank you for making the trip. Really appreciate it.
Yes, JM.
And if people want to know more about the Real Organic Project, you can go on the website, realorganicproject.org. I, as an organic farmer myself, would highly recommend that you guys join the movement. And I think we didn't talk about this time, but I think getting certified is still very important today.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraging everyone to do so. I hope you guys enjoyed this talk we did. We'll see you next time.
And do you have anything you want to plug or anything coming up, events, things that want to...
So many things. Well, actually, Jam's going to come and speak
at
our
September.
Conference in Churchtown.
Finally.
That's right. That's right. And that is an amazing event. We have our Farmer Friday, which is a very much smaller. And then
that's June 23rd.
3rd, I believe.
Yeah.
And then the Saturday is a bigger thing
in Vermont,
in Hudson Valley, New
Hudson
York,
Valley, New York,
and at Abby Rockefeller's farm there.
Nice.
And it's a beautiful farm, and we'll have amazing people speaking and amazing people listening. It's hard to tell the difference there, honestly. Anybody in the audience probably could be a speaker, and anyone who's speaking could certainly be a keynote. And Elliot will be there.
Great. So is that on the website also?
It's not up yet. We're still piecing it together, but
Okay.
we should get.
It'll by the time this comes out.
That's right. It'll be on the website. Yeah.
All right.
So that's coming up.
You heard it first here, guys. I hope you guys are doing well. We'll see you next time. We're out.
Hope you're enjoying the podcast. These are important conversations, and we're really excited to have them and to share them with everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to it, download the episodes, and please rate them. It makes a difference for us. We want to know what you think about these conversations. They're important. Check out the work that we do at the Market Gardener Institute. You can check out our website, themarketgardener.com. Our mission is to multiply the number of small ecological farms around the world. And we do this by offering training, online courses to new aspiring farmers, but also to seasoned growers. We're helping them take it to the next level. So you can check out the work that we do. You can follow us on social media. You can sign up to our newsletter to get a lot of freebies about gardening, farming, but also about how small-scale farming is changing the world. And that's really what we're all about, and that's really what this is all about. So again, thank you for tuning in. Super excited that you guys are on board. We are changing the world.